So I'm at the very top of our southern ridge, about in the gap, about halfway back on our property, standing here on this natural gas transmission pipeline. And I want to answer a question and discuss what many of you have commented about when seeing this pipeline, saying, does that not ruin your homestead acreage, having that pipeline run through it?
A little windy on top of the mountain, so I don't know if hopefully the audio is picking up. So try to line it up here, but this gas line, I'm standing on the edge of my property. The gas line goes down through the back of the valley and comes back up, and it resurfaces, or actually it hits the ridge line back there. So that ridge line is me as well. And this pipeline goes all the way through it. The house is this way. Barn, workshop, all that type of stuff is down there.
So I recognize the first thing I probably ought to do is explain what a transmission pipeline is for those of you all not in a lot of fossil fuels areas throughout the country or the world. So there is beneath my feet, actually it's right over here a little bit, but beneath my feet is a large diameter pipe. I believe this one is 14 inches or less. And it is the straightest line possible here in West Virginia, going from point A to point B throughout the state. And it's transmitting natural gas. So there's a lot of gas being pushed through this to get from point A to point B. Maybe a large service area or a holding system, big processing facility, or just serving an area of the country that doesn't have natural gas in it. I'm not sure where this one goes, to be honest with you. Or some of the characteristics of a transmission pipeline like this is a right-of-way that has to be cut and maintained. So you can see there's this clearing through the woods that is maintained on a regular basis. The gas company does not own this land. I own this land that this is on. But when I bought this land, I knew going into it that it had this pipeline in place. It's been here for decades. And that by buying the land, I had to comply with the rules associated with this pipeline.
As you can see, this pipeline is it's roughly about 50 feet wide swath all the way through.
So while the right-of-way is about 50 feet wide, the pipe itself obviously isn't that wide. The pipe is located under these markers. Let's see if I can line this up.
But you can see this marker right here in front of me. Well, there's another marker down there in that little saddle. It's got an orange tip on it. And they're just sporadically placed along these miles and miles of right-of-way. And this is where the actual pipe resides. It's kind of funny that when you look at it, you'd think, okay, why is it not in the center of the right-of-way? Well, it doesn't really matter to them. They just want to have the right-of-way clear for access so they can work, inspect, and repair.
I love the irony here that it says, damage or removal of this sign is a federal offense. But when their own company comes through here with their big bush hog and cuts it, they end up running over them, tear them all to pieces. So some turkey has to come back and put them all back. Well, I just answered my own question. According to the Sharpie written here, it says 10-inch. So this may be a 10-inch transmission line, which is pretty substantial.
So the 10-inch line that's buried here, if that's truly the size, the 10-inch line that's buried here is supposed to be buried 3 to 6 feet deep. So if I'm just coming through with a tractor or something drags and scrapes, anything like that, then I don't have to worry about hitting that. That obviously is not going to be a concern.
So there are rules associated with this pipeline right-of-way that I have to honor as a landowner. And again, it has federal implications if I do not. The first and foremost is what I'm allowed to do in close proximity of this line. And the rules pertain not to the right-of-way, but to the pipeline itself.
So again, when I turn around, the pipe being here, now my property actually ends right down the edge of this. So I don't have any property on this side other than a little swath. But when it comes to this side, that's where the pipeline itself kind of hugs closer to. So the restrictions in my area are as follows. I cannot build a dwelling no less than 50 feet on either side of this pipeline. So if I come 50 feet over and do a parallel line all the way down the valley and all the way back up the other side, then I cannot build a residence or dwelling there. Same on this side. So on this side of the post, measure 50 feet over, draw that same imaginary line. So there's about 100-foot swath there that I'm not allowed to build a dwelling.
But when it comes to non-dwelling structures like a shed, a barn, a shack, anything like that, that's not going to have permanent residents in it, I'm allowed 25 feet. So 25 feet, I can get a little closer to the pipeline. Now, honestly, as far as a dwelling goes, you know, my house is way, way far away. It's, you know, my goodness, as the crow flies, it's probably almost half a mile. As the four-wheeler goes, it's a lot further. So I don't have to worry about that. Not planning on building a house back here anytime soon. And even if I was, I don't know that I'd want to push the limits of that 100 feet. You know, a 10-foot pipeline full of gas, the reason why they don't want you building that close to it is if it would happen to blow up, they don't want to incinerate the people living beside it. So the rule is in place for our own safety. And in West Virginia, we've had a couple pipelines go, so it's not pretty when they do. Now, when it comes to fencing or those type of small elements, we are allowed to come within 6 to 10 feet as far as putting fence posts in and that type of stuff. Now, again, you want to be careful taking the auger and driving a fence post in when you've got a 10-inch gas line that you could possibly rupture. That would be a bad day. So right here, this fence line and gate is my neighbor Chuck's property. So this is his gate, his fence line. The gas line right away goes right here. Let's turn around. Gas line right away comes right up through, and that natural gas pipeline goes right underneath his gate. But he's allowed to do so. As a landowner, he is allowed to block this off. Let me show you what he's had to do though. So to comply with the natural gas rules of being able to come in and have maintenance access, he's got two locks on here. One lock is not even doing anything. But normally, you could have one lock for yourself, one lock for the gas company, and usually you lock the lock within the lock. So if you don't want to share your key with the gas company, then they have their own, or everyone just shares a key. But the gas company maintenance guys are supposed to be allowed to gain access for inspection and for maintenance. So Chuck has to comply and allow them access. Now, obviously, they are responsible if cows get out, if there's damage to the property, that type of stuff. They are still liable for that. So one other rule that we have to comply with is we don't want to change the elevation grade of the land within the right-of-way easement. So for example, this knoll at the summit of Chuck's property, if he decided, well, I want to be able to have a flatter cow pasture here, so I'm going to bring a dozer in and I'm going to cut this down a bit. Well, obviously you'd see the issue with that. There's a 10-inch transmission line going through there, so if he would cut that down and sever that pipe, then yeah, we'd be picking up pieces of Chuck all over the southern part of the state. So, you know, Chuck's smart enough, he's not going to do that. You can actually do some grading and excavating around the right-of-way and even on the right-of-way. So if we wanted to cut a road across here, something that we want to get completely on grade, level with ditch and everything, we could do so. We just have to have the gas company come out and confirm that the depth of the pipe is where it's supposed to be. Again, not something I want to play around with all the time, but I do have roads that cross over the pipeline that the logging company built when they logged my property. I didn't put those in myself, so they were the ones responsible for accessing the pipeline. So I want to hit real quick just a list of possible benefits for having a gas line right away on your property. They're not big, it's not a great list, but there is some benefit. And the first, in our area at least, is an opportunity to have actually some clearing in a huge hardwood forest. There is some benefit for this big swath of cleared land through my property in the sense that it allows me some access with the side-by-side of the tractor. I can get from point A to point B. Some places it's too steep for me to be able to drive down, but kind of where I'm standing now, I didn't access it via road, I just drove right up the pipeline. With that same clearing, then of course you have a potential food plot for wildlife. So deer and those type of things come in, and I've even seen guys come in and seed, actually improve the ground cover so they could have some pretty nice food plots for hunting. The fact that I have 1,000 yards plus of a straight shot makes for a pretty nice rifle range too. And not that it's an issue here, but because we don't deal with wildfires a lot, but it could make a logical fire break. And of course, another benefit is like what you see behind me here with Chuck. Chuck's not currently running cattle. When his dad was alive, they had cattle, but he uses a good swath of this for pasture land. So his cattle can actually graze that. They've cut hay off of it. They've been able to improve that ground and be able to use it as cleared land for his livestock. So what are the cons with having a gas line right away on your property? Well, I think the cons kind of outweigh the pros. Simply because the first thing, you may look at it and say, well, that's an eyesore. I want a nice intact hardwood forest, and bang, here's a big right of way. So that's a big deal breaker, or that's just unsightly, definitely. Obviously, there's the danger that goes associated with pipelines. Now, while pipeline explosions happen, they're extremely rare. So it's not like you should live in constant fear of a gas line exploding if you would happen to have a piece of land with one on it. Another con, if you followed my channel, you'll see where I'd lamented last year about not responding to their request to come in and use herbicide to maintain vegetation growth. If I would just simply called or responded to their letter, then I could have stopped that from happening. As property owner, I still have the authority to stop that, but I just forgot to do it. It was one of those things, I got the letter, set it aside, meant to do it, never did, bang, they sprayed. It's kind of funny, whatever they used must have been extremely diluted or weak, because it didn't kill hardly anything. In fact, there's sycamore saplings growing up pretty good. They're going to have to come in and use some equipment to get some of these real steep parts where trees are growing. And really probably the biggest con that I have is, just like any good red-blooded American, is having somebody tell you what you can or cannot do with your land. So the fact that there's this 100-foot swath through the back of my property that I'm not allowed to do specific stuff with, yeah, it does kind of rub me the wrong way, but it's really not taking up a whole chunk of my 100 acres, and I'm still able to use all that land around it. So another con that could possibly be a pro is, if you look at property appraisals, there is a decrease in property value when there is a utility right-of-way incorporated. Most appraisers see that as a negative versus a positive. So if you own the land and you're trying to sell it, then of course that devaluation hurts a little. But if you're looking for homestead land you plan on spending most of your life on, then you could possibly get a better deal on land simply because it's been devalued due to that right-of-way. Now, a big asterisk by that statement is, of course, make sure that right-of-way doesn't completely negate the value of the land because of its building restrictions. If you plan on putting a house or a barn and all those things, that right-of-way goes right through the middle of the most pristine place to do so, then maybe you walk away from it. If it's a situation like this where, okay, it's on the back part of the property and really doesn't affect the plans for years and years to come, I'd really have to do a lot of infrastructure building to get back here for that to be an issue, then it was an opportunity that I think helped influence the low price on the property that we got. Now, all of this is particular to gas line right-of-ways, but you also have to look at power right-of-ways. There's some details and rules a little different with those, but similar restrictions apply when it comes to building and what you can do with that specific area of land. So do your homework. If you're looking at potential land that has one of those right-of-ways, do your homework, check it out, and just make sure you've done enough research. And even talk to that company that holds the easement rights, so maybe make sure there's no strange nuance to their right-of-way in that specific situation. Well, I hope that answers everybody's question. That's a lot to dump on you, but that's the story with our gas line. All right, take care.